to Maths on Radio, a program catalyzed and supported by National Council for Science and Technology Communication, Department of Science and Technology, New Delhi.
सोचो, सीखो, बोलो, बदलो, सोचो, सीखो, बोलो, बदलो, चमका दो दुनिया को, जीत लो इस जहां को।
सोचो, सीखो, बोलो, बदलो, सिर्फ मैथ्स ऑन रेडियो के साथ 107.8 FM मस्ट रेडियो पर।
वन 7.8 मस्त रेडियो पर हमारे सुनने वाले तमाम श्रोताओं का स्वागत है। भाई हम लोग एक बार फिर आ चुके हैं रेडियो पर। हाँ बिल्कुल सही। अब हम रेडियो पर आ चुके तो आप यही सोच रहे होंगे कि हम हमेशा प्यार मोहब्बत वाली बातें करेंगे। जी हाँ बिल्कुल, ये भी सही बात है, लेकिन प्यार मोहब्बत की बातों के साथ हम कुछ और भी बात करना चाहते हैं, प्रॉफिट या लॉस की। जी बिल्कुल सही कह रहे हैं, जरूर सोच रहे हैं आपके प्यार मोहब्बत में प्रॉफिट और लॉस की बात तो होती नहीं, लेकिन जब जिंदगी की गाड़ी हकीकत के पटरी पर दौड़ने लगती है तब जाकर हमें कैलकुलेशन करना बहुत ज्यादा जरूरी होता है भाई। तभी जाकर तो हम अपने सही मकाम पर पहुंचते हैं। मेरा कहने का मतलब है कि सही स्टेशन पर पहुंचते हैं। और इन कैलकुलेशंस को करने के लिए आपको चाहिए क्या क्या चाहिए, कौन सा विषय चाहिए? जी बिल्कुल बिल्कुल सही, गणित। अगर गणित आपको आता है तो आपके हर कैलकुलेशन, और मैं कहूंगा कि आपको हर चीज आपके तयशुदा वक्त पर आपको मिल जाएगी। और इसके लिए एक बार फिर हम लेकर आ चुके हैं मैथ्स ऑन रेडियो सीजन 2।
1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9 10 11 12 13।
क्या पूजा, तेरा क्या की गिनती नहीं आती क्या?
नहीं आता रे, उसके लिए क्या करना पड़ेगा?
उसके लिए तुझे 107.8 मस्त रेडियो पे मैथ्स ऑन रेडियो सुनना पड़ेगा।
वाओ, दैट मीन्स घर पे बैठ के मैथ सीखो। दैट्स ऑसम। Today we are going to learn a simple concept of profit and loss. Like a simple example, if I give you, supposing a shopkeeper is buying an article, for supposing a bicycle for 1200, okay, and he sells it for 1300. Okay, so the buying, that is the cost price, and he sells it 1300 is the selling price. Now how will you calculate profit? Now, so profit is will be selling price minus the cost price. So selling price is 1300 and cost price is 1200. So when you do 1300 minus 1200, you get 100 as the answer. So 100 rupees is the shopkeeper's profit. So this is how you calculate profit, that is selling price minus the cost price. Now I will tell you how a shopkeeper goes into a loss. Supposing the shopkeeper buys supposing a fruit for 100 rupees and sells it for 80 rupees. So in loss, what do we do is the cost price minus the selling price. So now the cost price of the fruit was 100 and he sold it for 80 rupees. So he faced a loss of around 20 rupees. So this is how we calculate loss. So loss is equal to cost price minus the selling price.
फिर से मैथ्स में 0। हे भगवान, कब बनेगी तू मैथ्स का हीरो? क्या करूं मैं इस लड़की का?
अरे ट्यूटोरियल ज्वाइन करवा दो।
अरे नहीं, एजुकेशनल क्लासेस।
नहीं, प्रीति मैम की नोट से ही पढ़ लो।
नो मॉम, अब मैं करूंगी मैथ्स में टॉप और उड़ाऊंगी आपके होश, क्योंकि बढ़ रहा है मेरा जोश। अब नहीं देंगे हम मैथ्स टीचर को दोष, बिकॉज मैथ्स ऑन रेडियो हर रोज सिर्फ और सिर्फ 107.8 मस्त FM पर, सुबह 9 बजे, दोपहर 1 बजे और शाम 7 बजे।
तो वही आज की भाग दौड़ भरी जिंदगी में हर कोई चाहता है कि मैं आगे बढ़ूं। हर किसी का कोई न कोई सपना जरूर है, और खासकर एक बंगला बने न्यारा, वो तो हर किसी का सपना है। एक मकान हो, साथ में गाड़ी हो, और घर में लगने वाली वो तमाम छोटी मोटी चीजें हो जो आज के दौर में बड़ी ही आसानी से मिल जाती है 0% ब्याज पर, जिसे हम खरीद लाते हैं EMI पर। EMI का मतलब क्या है? यानी इक्वेटेड मंथली इंस्टॉलमेंट। पर क्या ये EMI चुकाना इतना आसान होता है, या फिर हम लोग कभी इन बारीकियों के बारे में सोचते ही नहीं? जी बिल्कुल, क्योंकि हम बैंक से लोन तो ले लेते हैं या फिर कहीं से कोई EMI पर चीज जरूर खरीद लाते हैं, लेकिन उसके पीछे कैलकुलेशन होता है जो बैंक बिल्कुल अपना गणित बनाकर लगा कर रखती है। लेकिन इस गणित को हम कभी जान नहीं पाते हैं, और इस गणित को जानना हमें बहुत ज्यादा जरूरी है। तभी तो हमें पता चलेगा कि जो चीज हमने खरीदी है, या घर लिया है, गाड़ी ली है, या कोई चीज जैसे कि फ्रिज हो गया या वॉशिंग मशीन हो गई, जो हम लेकर आए हैं, उसके पीछे हमने कितने पैसे दिए हैं, कितना क्या खर्च हुआ है, ये सारी चीजें जानना उतना ही ज्यादा जरूरी है। और ये कब हमें पता चलता है? जब हम पूरी तरह से इस गणित को जान लेते हैं, मगर हम कभी इस गणित के बारे में सोचते ही नहीं। तो दोस्तों, इन्हीं बातों की जानकारी के लिए आज हम आपको मिलवाने वाले हैं हमारे मेहमान से, जो है संतोष शिरूर।
Hello friends, welcome to another episode of Maths on Radio Season 2. I am your friend Pankaj, and today we have invited in our studio a very dear friend of ours who has a terrific experience in banking. He is currently the Assistant Vice President at the Barclays Bank, and Santosh Sirur, welcome to the show.
Thank you Pankaj, nice to be on the show with you.
Yes, banking, we all are very happy doing it, and of course a lot of people have accounts, a lot of people want to take loans, but is it necessary, or have you seen a lot of people understanding the mathematics behind basic loans?
Not really. What really happens, Pankaj, is loan is something that really entices you so much that you get into it and you are actually kind of sucked into it. So one should really know also about the jargons being used about loans when we discuss loans, when they are going up for loans. What really one looks at is only the interest rate. If that suits me or you, go for it.
But even that is on a very superficial level. I mean, someone says 10.75 or 11%. We probably do not really calculate a lot. It's fine. Okay. Let's go for it.
Absolutely. What really happens is you look at this 10.6 and 10.2. You say, wow, 10.2 is something that But one should really look into the nitty-gritties of this. And one very important aspect, or I would say the jargon, is something called the EMI.
Yes.
Which is the equated monthly installment. Because that's one number or that amount or that figure which simply debits, or I would say vanishes from your account at either the end of the month
or the beginning of the month.
Beginning of the month, as soon as your salary is credited.
Yes. Now these numbers we are going to talk about, friends, in our episode. But before we start talking about EMI, there was a movie called EMI sometime back in starring Sanjay Dutt, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
But people don't bother thinking about the EMI, neither they bother thinking about calculations. But before we start talking about the actual mathematics involved in loans, can we talk, or can we tell our listeners about the type of loans that are there in the market?
Absolutely. There are quite a few variety of loans. Typically we associate only with home loan, which is a big chunk, but one of course is the home loan, and much more in demand. So when you say home loan, it's all got to do with the land to construct a home, or it could be buying a home, or even renovating or improving your current home.
Okay.
So that comes under the category of a home loan. Then there's mortgages, which are loans against properties or loans against your equities and securities.
Anything it may be, physical or...
Absolutely. So you kind of, keep it aside and it's given to someone, and against that which is your own ownership, which moves out to someone, and then you actually avail a loan.
Right.
The third is something which really is not a necessity, but people feel it's all to do with a status symbol, and that's the auto loan. So for your new cars or used cars, so one loan which is kind of avoidable, but well, there is a market for that. Then comes the commercial business loans. So that's more from, I would say, the commercial sense, where one goes in for commercial vehicles, or typically in agricultural sector, rural sector. It could be for tractors, it could be for three-wheelers, or even heavy machinery. And then, of course, the Diwalis and the New Years and the Daseras come with something called the consumer loans. Okay, it could either be from your offices where you get some kind of a discount, or it could be you walking into one of those big flashy shops and going in for a 47-inch or a fuzzy logic washing machine or whatever, but there is a lot of logic behind one needs to work, and that's mathematics.
Because they basically tell you that this is the price, we are giving you another 60% off for it, and just pay simple EMIs.
Absolutely. In fact, they even go to the extent of saying 0% interest rate.
Exactly.
So that is that big zero which is in your account at the end of the day.
Yes, but it is actually not 0%.
Yeah, I will take this further later. Yes. And the last and one of the most important loan, I think it's much in demand, and that's where it's worrying, is the personal loans.
Right.
So there's not really any reason associated, one avails it. You just because you have a hefty balance in your account, guys approach you for these loans, and once you just go in for it, and that's something which is worrying.
Right. So your rate of interest may vary anywhere from 9.5% to 15, 16,
Absolutely.
18, 20%.
It could be going really beyond 18 also.
Right.
Especially more so when you are not going to pay your interest or your installment in time. And that's something which really burns a big hole in your pocket.
And we need to understand the mathematics behind it, because there is a specific interest for a particular amount, but if you don't pay that, there is another amount which is added on to that interest. So these numbers, the percentage and the interest, has to be simply understood. I think this is what we are taught in school.
Absolutely. It's going to back to basics, going to basic math, and that's where EMI really comes in. So as I said earlier, EMI or equated monthly installment, it's the amount one has to pay your financier. That's the one who actually provides you that loan on a monthly basis, and that's where EMI comes in. It's an unequal combination. So it's a combination. It's not just your interest, but also your contribution or your combination of the principal repayment. So you got to remember, it's not the interest only.
Yes.
You have availed a chunk of money which you also got to pay back.
Right.
So it's that unequal combination of principal repayment and the interest payment. So the principal repayments, typically what happens is they take predominance as the end of the repayment tenure comes in.
That means the principal will be levied not initially. So initially most of the amount will be the interest amount on whatever principal you have taken, and then as you start going further, then the principal is accrued back.
Absolutely. So interest comes first, and then really the chunk or the, I would say, the percentage of the principal repayment.
And that's why you mentioned the unequal
combination. Absolutely right. I'll give you an instant for here.
Right.
Let's take a very simple amount where you have availed a loan of 1 lakh.
1 lakh.
So 1 lakh.
Okay.
And then they say the repayment tenure is 5 years. So you say, fine, after 5 years I'm a free bird.
That's a 60-month period.
Yeah. And there you have an annual rate of interest which they say is going to be 10.5% calculated on an annual reducing basis.
That means in the first year on 10 lakh rupees, I will have to give them 10,500 rupees.
Typically, yeah. So here we have example of 1 lakh. So accordingly, the proportionate amount.
Correct.
So what will happen is constant amount EMI, if you really calculate, comes to 2,226. So the EMI will stay constant for all those 60 months which you mentioned at 2,226. However, in the first year of repayment, only 16,218 rupees of the principal is repaid.
Right.
And in the final, which is the 5th year, you actually end up paying 24,179 of the same, which is the principal in the end.
That means now just a basic calculation, if you have 1 lakh rupees a loan taken for 60 months at an interest rate of 10.5%, the EMI you said typically comes to 2,226. Now if I multiply that by 60 months, I get an amount of 1,33,560. That means in 5 years, I am paying an interest of or an additional amount of 33,560 rupees. almost 30% of my original amount in 5 years.
And that's precisely where the math comes in. So if that same 1 lakh, let's say, it's very important because it is possible that you have that 1 lakh which is a surplus.
Correct.
And you're apparently, you have a fixed deposit where you've placed it.
Right.
So you really got to do that trade-off and see whether it's worth breaking that FD and using that amount or availing the loan, paying that interest plus that, the repayment.
Service charge and other things.
So you really got to do that trade-off. It makes sense and it depends on the rate of inflation. A lot of variable factors. Having said that, typically a financier, he will calculate the EMI taking into basic 4 principles or basic 4 factors.
Okay.
One, of course, is the principal.
Right.
Which is the actual loan amount. The second is the repayment period. That is the number of
months or years
to repay, as it's called a tenure.
Right.
The third is the rate of interest, which is the annual rate of interest.
Okay.
And last is how the rate of interest is computed. So typically, one may say I'll pay monthly. Some may say, well, you can always pay that on a quarterly reducing basis, or even go to the extent of, which is though rarely, annual reducing basis.
Okay.
So that's the way the EMI comes in, and then you end up paying quite a bit.
I think, basic calculations if we do in our mind, for example, if you're taking a loan of 1 lakh with all the things mentioned, you're almost paying 30% the amount in 5 years.
Absolutely.
Now, if I keep that amount in a fixed deposit, for example, at maybe 10%, I'm getting a typically 10,000 rupees per year.
Yes.
But in the next year, will I get a 10% on 1 lakh 10,000? Or just 1 lakh?
So that depends. That's compounding. So if you have kept it for 3 years, then in the end you may actually have a compounding effect. But at the same time, you got to remember you have the other 3-letter word, which is the tax on that. So you got to be really careful because that's going to be also paid to the government. So you got to really do that, and that's where the trade-off comes in. The fine balancing comes in.
So basically, if you are earning more than 5,000 in interest through various things, then you are liable for tax above that particular amount or with whatever rate it is. So that mathematic also has to be understood.
Absolutely. So that really makes a difference. Another very important factor, and one really, especially when you're availing a loan, you always have in mind is whether you should, what are these adjustable or floating rate loans?
Yes, friends, we are listening to Maths on Radio Season 2. We are talking to Santosh Sirur, a banker by profession, and we are talking about the mathematics involved in generic loans. Santosh, you gave an example of how if you take a loan of 1 lakh rupees, for example, for a period of 5 years, that's 60 months, and at a rate of 10.5%, the EMI would be roughly calculated to about 2,226 rupees. And in the end, I have to pay after 5 years an amount of 1,33,560. Can we think a bit bigger, because this is just a 1 lakh loan?
I think I agree with you. We must take a realistic example, a 2014 kind of a scenario, an ongoing scenario, because home loans, 1 lakh, it is not even a loan.
I mean, you actually spend more on renovation for that particular amount.
So I guess that was possibly a very basic ground level example. So let's take an assumption case of a ready possession flat, typically in a place like, let's say, central Mumbai, and it's bought on a loan for investment purpose. So, I mean, this is the realistic life, right? You have one house where you're staying. The next one is, the second home, which is more for an investment purpose. I really wonder who comes and stays there. But having said that, it's an investment purpose and will be sold after 5 years at double the cost price.
Really?
So that's the assumption.
Okay.
So this is how it works. So the cost of the flat is 50 lakhs.
Right.
The down payment, which is one that when you immediately go in for a loan, you need to pay some DP or down payment, and that comes to around 10 lakhs.
So that's probably around 70-80% of the overall
it comes
amount.
To around that. So that's 10 lakhs. The loan amount effectively turns out to be 40 lakhs.
Right.
Now on 40 lakh, here the rate of interest, let's take 10%.
Right. Okay.
Now here the expected monthly rental income, which is of course 3% of the flat value in the first year, and 5% growth every year. That's the assumption.
Okay, I mean, now there are two things. One is the EMI, and one you're also talking about the possible rental returns you may get.
Absolutely.
Okay,
so,
before that, what would be the tenure for such kind of a loan?
So typically, when it comes to these kind of loan, the tenure normally would come to roughly around 20 years.
20 years.
So I'm really looking at a long-term.
Okay, now let's repeat some numbers for our listeners. 50 lakh is the property that I want to buy. I am
Right.
just going to put in 10 lakh rupees of my own as down payment. 40 lakh I am going to take a loan at 10% per annum.
Yeah.
And my duration or the tenure is 20 years.
Yes.
Right. Now, there are two amounts which come after this. One is the EMI that I'm going to pay, and
Yeah.
because it's a ready flat possession, I rent it out to someone,
Yeah.
and I'm getting some money back.
So
We'll compare
typically,
that.
yeah. So typically, what you're looking at is a scenario where you're availing a loan, you're making a down payment. So there are 4 avenues out here. One is the actual 10 lakh that you're paying as a down payment. So there's an outgo.
Correct.
Then there's an inflow, which is your 40 lakhs, which is your actual loan amount.
Right.
Then there is this flat, incidentally ready to buy and take possession of. So you're expecting some kind of a money coming in
Return.
through rental. So that's another
Right.
inflow. But at the same time, there's an outflow of the
Maintenance.
the major maintenance and of course your installment.
In fact, people, I guess, if they do their math properly, there are not just one component as an EMI. There's also another component called the maintenance that you pay every month to the society.
Yeah. Now, no one really accounts for the maintenance of the maintenance.
Now, that's interesting.
Yeah, that's, you got to pay end of the day the maintenance, be it your housing complex, your infrastructure support,
Right.
the lifts that you use, and that's quite a chunk.
And people don't really calculate
Look
that.
into that.
Okay.
They don't even look into that. One only looks at those flashy ads, goes in for the loans, but then there's this huge chunk of maintenance unless and until you happen to be a case where you are in possession of a property and that's gone in for some kind of a redevelopment. There is a corpus.
That's a
and
different story.
yeah, but that is very rare.
Right.
I'm talking of scenarios where maintenance is the next big
Component that you
demon
go to-
on
Yes.
that one needs to really be cautious about.
So
And that's
now-
quite a
yes.
chunk.
Now let's talk about the EMI for this particular loan.
Yeah.
And the rental returns, roughly what we can have.
Yeah, so having said that, the upfront down payment being made is 10 lakhs.
Right.
So, of course, there is going to be the stamp duty, which is approximately 6%.
Okay.
So, on this amount, it comes to around 3 lakhs.
That's additional.
Yes.
Okay. So 40 lakh loan is not just enough, my friends.
There's a lot more to talk about. Then comes the installment, which is, of course, 10% EMI for 20 years, which is 38,601.
Roughly.
So, yeah, so approximately 40 is out there.
Uh-huh.
So your total EMI outflow in over 5 years will come to roughly 23 lakhs 16,060.
Mm-hmm.
And you remember there's this principal which you need to prepay in 5 years, which is 4 lakhs 7,902.
Oh.
And then the balance which you got to pay in the next 5 years, eventually, which here I'm including both the EMI as well as the principal. The principal, of course, gaining more
Prominence
weightage
later
and
on.
prominence
Yeah.
in due course, where it comes to around 35 lakh 90,098, which is almost close to the loan.
Exactly.
Almost close.
This
to
is
the
what people have to realize.
loan. Yeah.
So, I mean, the point is, if I just look at that number which you told me, that is 38,601. That's
Yeah.
my EMI for 20 years.
Yes.
I would be repaying what, 77 lakh rupees in
Yeah.
20 years
Yes.
for a loan taken
At
of 40 lakhs.
40 lakhs.
I could have bought another property.
Might as well.
Yes. Apart from that, what would be, and to make me feel better, to make my listeners feel better, what would be the rental return roughly over 20 years? If I rent that property for 20 years for that matter, assuming that whatever the rate or the actual value it would be after 20 years, forget about it. I am paying 77 lakh rupees roughly, returning the loan over 20 years. In 20 years, if I rent on a very minimum level, what would be my basic return?
Typically, you can expect a rental of 30 to 40 to 50 max. That is, if you get a person to come in on rent.
Right.
Well,
For
that's
example,
equally
if
important.
you get someone to come on rent at maybe 25,000 rupees per month.
Yeah.
Okay. Now that really makes it much more simpler. That in the first year,
Yeah.
25,000, you are basically getting about 3 lakh rupees back from the person, and
At most, it takes care of your maintenance.
okay. And if I anyway increase that by 5 or 10% every year, still the maintenance is going to go up every year.
Yeah.
So that means at the end of the day, the rental money which is coming just takes care more or less not about for your EMI, but for your actual maintenance cost.
At the most. Exactly. And also, you got to remember, Pankaj, that what we are talking about is expectation or an assumption that this rental will coming on a continuous basis. Because if you are in a town where, there is demand, or if there is then you have a guy coming in and knocking on your door saying, I want to stay on rent in a place, you know. But if the supply is more, then that's where the market economics works, and you may actually end up being so competitive that you will be even agreeing to a really mediocre amount where you basically find this come and occupy the place.
If the people think about the basic mathematics involved in a home loan, they would probably rethink twice or thrice before actually taking a home loan.
Yeah, and then we still spoke about 50 lakhs as a basic assumption, but going by the market trends,
crore and a half,
1 lakh, 1 crore, 2 crore, 2.5, and that to 1.5 BHK, 2.5 BHK, and you know,
massive.
All, I mean, it's quite a worrying and a very scary
basically
situation.
A boomeranging situation.
Yeah, and I really don't know how long will this kind of a market really hold.
Absolutely.
You know, Mumbai kind of a place still demand, because you know, metros I'm not too worried. But I'm not talking of outer metros, you know, life beyond metros.
You're talking like a typical banker now.
Yeah, so I think really we really got to, and it is also the market economics that works.
Right.
So one needs to be really cautious.
So in fact, our episodes always try to talk about the application of basic mathematics, and if that can make a difference to your life, that's basically our idea in this episode of Maths on Radio Season 2. Santosh, thank you very much. We just spoke about how the EMIs are generally calculated and the mathematics in basic loans. In our further episodes, we'll talk more in detail about the other aspects and the other mathematical aspects regarding home loans or other loans.
Thank you so much, Pankaj.
Thank you. Stay tuned to Maths on Radio Season 2.
दो जीन्स, 3 कुर्ता, 5 शर्ट, 4 साड़ी और 2 टॉप्स, कितना हुआ?
2 जीन्स का 10 रुपया, 3 कुर्ते का 9 रुपया, 5 शर्ट का 10 रुपया, 4 साड़ी का 40 रुपया और 2 टॉप का 5 रुपया। मतलब हुआ 10, 9, 10, 40, 5, 74।
हाँ, ऐसे कैसे? रुक जरा, मैं कैलकुलेटर से चेक करती हूँ। हाँ रे, राइट बोल रही है एकदम। तुझे कैसे इतना आता है?
बस क्या मैडम, रेडियो सुनने का और इस्त्री करने का।
मतलब?
अरे मैडम, वो रेडियो पे आता है ना 107.8 पर, मैथ्स ऑन मस्त रेडियो। 9 बजे, 1 बजे, 7 बजे आप सुनो और बच्चों को भी सुनाओ मैडम।
तो देखा दोस्तों, कितनी महत्वपूर्ण जानकारी हमें संतोष हीरू जी ने दी। बिल्कुल, बहुत ज्यादा जरूरी होता है कि हम कोई लोन लेने के बाद उसे किस तरह से चुकाएं और किस तरह से हमारा इसमें फायदा है या नुकसान है, किस तरह से हम इसका गणित कर सकते हैं। बहुत ही आसान तरीके से हमें आज संतोष जी ने बताया। दोस्तों, और भी अधिक जानकारी के लिए आप हमें मेल कर सकते हैं हमारे मेल आईडी पर, जो है radiomust@gmail.com, या फिर और भी ज्यादा जानकारी के लिए आप हमारे फेसबुक पर भी आ सकते हैं। जी हाँ, मस्त रेडियो का फेसबुक पेज भी आप लाइक कर सकते हैं, और हमारे मैथ्स ऑन रेडियो के एपिसोड्स को सुनने के लिए आप हमारी वेबसाइट पर भी लॉगिन कर सकते हैं। जी हाँ, www.mastradio.in से आप लॉगिन करके हमारे सभी एपिसोड्स की जानकारी ले सकते हैं। दोस्तों, एक बार फिर मैं आपसे इजाजत लेना चाहूंगा, लेकिन इस वादे के साथ कि अगली बार फिर आपकी मुलाकात होगी मैथ्स ऑन रेडियो सीजन 2 में। मैं हूं प्रशांत।
2 1s are 2, 2 2s are 5। अरे हंसा, 5 नहीं 6 होता है। मुझे तो कुछ नहीं आता भाई साहब। हंसा, ओ मेरी हंसा, चिंता क्यों करती है? तेरे जैसे हजारों बच्चों जिनको आंकड़ों से इतना प्रॉब्लम है, उन्हीं के लिए तो मस्त रेडियो नया प्रोग्राम लेके आया है, मैथ्स ऑन रेडियो।
हैला, ये तो मस्त है।
अभी तू भी सुन कल से, और चक्की की क्लास भी तू ही ले पाएगी।
तो सुनिए और सिखाइए मैथ्स ऑन रेडियो, ओनली ऑन मस्त रेडियो 107.8 FM।
दोस्तों, आज के लिए बस इतना ही। मैथ्स से जुड़ी जानकारियों के लिए सुनते रहिए हमारा प्रोग्राम मैथ्स ऑन रेडियो। अगर आप भी मैथ्स के बारे में कुछ जानना चाहते हैं या फिर हमें कुछ बताना चाहते हैं, तो तरीका बहुत ही आसान है। आप हमें ईमेल कर सकते हैं radiomust@gmail.com पे, या फिर आप लॉग इन कर सकते हैं हमारे फेसबुक पेज पर मैथ्स ऑन रेडियो @must। टिल देन, टेक केयर।
This is Must Radio, only on 107.8 FM.
Maths on Radio, a program catalyzed and supported by National Council for Science and Technology Communication, Department of Science and Technology, New Delhi.